A group of friends who meet at university, who arrive on campus full of hope, optimism, eagerness to learn, to connect with others, and to enjoy themselves. But soon, each person's wounds, traumas, and shortcomings begin to interact in a dark and unconscious way with those of the others. The result? As the semesters go by, dynamics of manipulation, idealization, deception, disappointment, and a lot of psychological suffering develop, to the point where they don't even recognize themselves. Today you're going to understand why people who seem good end up doing horrible things. And be careful, because Evan's profile or Pippa's profile might hold up a mirror to you. Because in this video, we're going to analyze the characters from Tell Me Lies: Bridley, Pippa, Evan, and Diana. It's a series that follows the story of this group of college students over 8 years. From their arrival on campus to the wedding that wrecks them all, I'll summarize their stories in this video so you can learn psychology even if you haven't seen the series, so you can better understand yourself and build healthier relationships. I've already analyzed Steven, Lucy, and Bree in earlier videos, so if you haven't seen them, I'll link them for you at the end. Stay until the end. I'm sure you'll relate to one of these 4 profiles or recognize them in someone you know. Let's start the video. Let's start with Bridley, a profile you might start out hating and end up loving.
Hey Lucy, you're a damn girlfriend, screaming.
Because her psychological evolution is tough, but it's beautiful. Let me tell you her story. When he gets to college, Bridley seems like the typical basic guy who only thinks about partying, sports, and goofing around. The one who causes trouble. He's the easygoing guy, the funny one, the one who never takes anything seriously and is always playing pranks. He doesn't study, he doesn't think about his future, and he's not able to have serious or deep conversations, and more than once he can be a bit irritating. Because he drinks too much, breaks things, and ignores others' boundaries. To truly understand Bridley, you need to know his origins. His parents had him as teenagers, and what he tells us he had is what in psychology we call permissive or laissez-faire parenting. No boundaries, no rules, no one to tell him to stop or think about the consequences. This might sound like anyone's dream, but having your parents raise you without rules and without punishments actually harms the development of your personality. And the thing is, boundaries aren't there to annoy you. They're set to teach you that your actions have consequences, that the world has a structure, a way it works, that you can't just do anything, that you have responsibility for what happens in your life and in your future.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get you involved in this.
And of course, when you're not taught these boundaries, you grow up thinking you can do anything without consequences, and that's exactly how Bridley shows up at college. A deeply irresponsible guy who finds it way too easy to turn his life into a complete mess, and that's exactly what happens. In just about a year, he throws his life away. But before I tell you what he does, let me talk to you about a very interesting clinical concept that reminds us of what happens to Bridley: manic defense. As you know, everyone has different ways of defending themselves against pain, uncertainty, insecurities, and threats. Some people hide, some attack, and some put on a mask. Some people try to please others, and some display a lot of energy, laughter, and activity as a way to compensate and protect themselves. This is the kind of person who, when something terrible happens to them, instead of looking sad, you see them start to smile, do things, make jokes, and go all out. These types of people look for things to do, activity, stimulation, and movement as a form of anesthesia. And the thing is, while you're on the move, while you're laughing, making plans, you don't have to feel. Activity works as anesthesia. Do you know anyone like that? Well, now you know that this is a manic defense.
Thank you for coming.
The use of activity, humor, and euphoria as a mechanism to avoid connecting with pain and inner emptiness. But as happens in many cases, there comes a point in Bridley's life when there is such a big breakdown that no manic defense can protect him. Because of his recklessness and bad decisions, in a short time he breaks his leg in an impulsive fight and can no longer play soccer. And even though that sounds like a silly thing, it isn't, because soccer was his safety net, it was his future, it was his excuse not to have to study or think about his responsibilities. But despite that, he keeps avoiding things, he still refuses to face reality. He uses substances, goes out partying, and one night he gives his little brother a dose that ends up killing him. That is, because of his carelessness and irresponsibility, his little brother dies. But it's here, in this pit of darkness, that Bridley finally wakes up and starts to grow. Unfortunately, there are people who need to hit rock bottom to realize things and wake up. The loss of his brother is not just grief, it's a brutal dose of reality. Going down that path, thinking only about the short term and having fun, he destroyed everything. I'm the one who gave him the pills, and I'm the one who ruined his life.
I didn't know what to do when he told me. I'm not good at handling this stuff.
And the thing is, the feeling of guilt, even though we see it as something really bad and we don't like it, is actually really useful from a clinical point of view because it brings us closer to reality and to other people. It pushes us to stop, to think, to reflect, to improve. That's when our defenses come down and we can start to see the real Bridley. The fragile one, the one who breaks, the one who feels guilt. And that's when he goes from being the most immature in the group to being the most mature, the most aware, the most honest, the most sensitive, the most coherent. The one who faces his emotional dependency, breaking up with his partner Pippa because neither of them was in love. The one who stands up to Stephen, a bully that no one else has dared to confront. The one who sincerely accepts his weaknesses, his fears, his emotions, fighting for Bree, the person he is truly in love with, and patiently and empathetically waiting for her to face her inner demons so they can finally be together. Without pride, without revenge, without facades. He knows what he wants, accepts, and waits with love. Personally, I love Bridley's character. I don't know if that's obvious. Because what he does is something that personally makes me admire him a lot. It's something we all have to learn, to use pain as leverage.
How many days have you not trained?
Well, none.
This is something not everyone achieves. Many get stuck in denial, in anger, in running away, in avoidance. Trauma, suffering, and life's blows can drag us down. But they can also turn us into wiser, stronger, more empathetic people. Bridley chooses, even if awkwardly and painfully, to mature and grow. That's why she changes from one of the most hated characters early on to the most beloved in the final season. If you saw yourself in Bridley, let me ask you this. What am I trying to avoid feeling while I keep myself busy? Now let's talk about Pippa, who has been Bridley's girlfriend for most of college. Pippa might be the hardest character to analyze. And that's exactly why she's interesting. Why is she hard to analyze? Because Pippa doesn't talk about what's going on with her. She doesn't talk about what she feels. She doesn't share anything about her life. Pippa simply acts out what's inside her. She always appears strong, confident, and brags about the guys she sleeps with. She doesn't empathize with her friends' vulnerabilities. That's something they complain about, that she doesn't really seem to empathize, and it seems like Pippa is above the insecurities of the other girls. But soon we start to see that it's just a facade. In reality, Pippa doesn't enjoy these relationships with the men she brags about. She's just pretending.
You could have told us.
In fact, she doesn't even like men. She likes women, but she represses it and hides it. She denies her own sexuality. Also, Pippa is quick to try to pair up with the most popular guy on campus, Bridley. Because of course, being close to someone who is socially admired acts as a kind of social shield. No one is going to single out the girlfriend of the handsome, friendly football player. After they break up, she hides it from her father and pretends they're still together. And when a student abuses her during a night out, she keeps it to herself. And for me, the most significant and revealing thing is that she never tells Lucy and Bree, who are supposed to be her best friends, that she was bullied at school. What people say gives us a lot of information, but sometimes what they don't say gives us even more information. And in summary, we see that life, identity, everything that revolves around Pippa is a lie. But it's not a Machiavellian lie that seeks to get something from others or to deceive. It's the result of a deep wound of rejection. At school, Pippa lived isolated, without friends, surrounded by mockery and being singled out. And this experience of bullying can leave very significant marks on us.
Don't you want us to repeat? Oh, no, that's not what I mean.
First, that deep feeling of pathological shame. It's not the kind of shame you feel about one specific thing. It's a chronic, constant shame, generalized to my whole self. It's a background feeling that you're fundamentally flawed, that if people really see you as you are, they'll reject you. The second element is then a deeply pathological learned pattern. To survive in the world, you have to maintain an external facade. The world is a place where if you truly show yourself, they'll push you aside. If you're different, they single you out. If you have something questionable, they reject you. And so, Pippa shapes herself so that no one can see anything that could be used against her. She lives for others, but not in an altruistic way. Rather in the sense of controlling her image. Always thinking about what others will think. Always managing how people perceive her. Hiding, lying, pretending. It's a defensive narcissism that doesn't come from grandiosity but from fear. It's not an I think I'm better than others kind of thing. It's an if I don't control what they see of me, they're going to destroy me. I'm not seeking admiration, I'm trying to avoid judgment and rejection. And even though at first this strategy allows her to have, for the first time in her life, a group of friends at university, a normal life and fit in socially, living behind a mask, behind lies, and under constant self-control eventually takes its toll. When a person rejects herself, denies herself, doesn't feel empathy or compassion for herself, it's hard for her to do it for others. And that's the paradox of this defensive narcissism that Pippa has. She wants to fit in with others, she wants to have friends, she wants to have connections, and for that, she rejects herself. But that disconnection from her vulnerable side makes her not very empathetic and not very considerate with her friends, even though she loves them. She ends up hurting others and losing the connection she wants.
Hey, I have to... Okay, see you later.
Pippa is becoming more and more emotionally distant from her friends. She uses Bridley as a social cover and as emotional comfort. And then something throws her whole world of appearances, control, and self-deception into total crisis. She falls in love with a woman, Diana, but it's no coincidence that she falls in love with her. Their connection has a psychological logic. Diana never questions, pressures, interrogates, or demands explanations from her. Behind closed doors and away from prying eyes, both of them allow themselves for the first time to be who they truly are. And this allows a healing process of identity integration to begin within Pippa. Her inner world, meaning who she truly is, finally begins to connect and fit with her outer world. That is, with how she presents herself to the world. It's the way out of that pathological shame and that defensive narcissism. For the first time, Pippa opens up and shows vulnerability with Diana. She even suggests moving to the other side of the country and following her for her studies. But Diana also has her own psychological processes. She gets overwhelmed and rejects Pippa. She breaks up with her. And of course, Pippa, who still isn't able to manage her vulnerability, impulsively uses Bridley to comfort herself. Even though she's not in love with him, nor does she want to be with him. This is an example of how most people who manipulate do it unconsciously, involuntarily. Not because they want to harm others, but because they don't know how to manage their pain, their shortcomings, their inner vulnerabilities. They end up channeling that into their relationships as manipulation. Reminder, if you want to learn to detect manipulation and manage relationships better, check out my book, It's Manipulation and You Don't Know It. By the way, it's now available in bookstores in Chile, Colombia, and Mexico. Despite this rough patch, we have a happy ending with Diana and Pippa. They reunite and become a couple, and there we can see a much healthier, happier, and more human Pippa.
All right, I'll wear a bikini in February for you.
Sometimes relationships can be very healing. If you relate to Pippa in any way, let me remind you that pathological shame makes you live from the outside in instead of from within. And if you don't face this, yes, you might be able to maintain a false appearance of perfection your whole life. But you will always carry a deep emptiness and feeling of loneliness. Because real connection, intimacy, requires being able to show your vulnerabilities. Maybe not with everyone, but at least with the people who matter. Let's continue with Evan. If with Bradley you start out hating him and end up loving him, for many people the opposite has happened with Evan. At the beginning of the story, he seems like a good guy, the only one who stands out among so much toxicity, manipulation, and deceit in that group of friends. And well, this character also goes through a transformation, but for the worse. He's the good guy who ends up becoming what he used to hate. Let me tell you. Evan comes from a wealthy, structured family, everything in order. He arrives at college with something his friends don't have: innocence. A genuine belief that the world is a place where if you're good to others, others will be good to you. He's stable, responsible, doesn't cause trouble, always takes care of others, organizes plans for his friends, welcomes them into his apartment, takes them to his family's lake house so they can have fun. Always thinking about others, trying to make sure they have a good time. He downplays the hurtful things his friends do to him. Like when Ridley, in one of her crazy moments, throws a bowling ball in Evan's house and breaks furniture. Like when they pressure Evan to hook up with Bree, even though he doesn't like her at first. Or like when he invites his friends for that weekend, prepares everything, and no one remembers to buy him a cake on his birthday. He prepares everything himself and buys the cake himself.
Remember, don't trust anyone unless they have a moose.
These little details gradually erode his innocence. When a person gives consistently without receiving reciprocity, recognition, or at least consideration or respect, and even starts to be abused, taken advantage of, and minimized, the person begins to internalize a dangerous message. Being good is a flaw, and little by little this leads to something we psychologists see a lot in clinical practice: identification with the aggressor. It happens when someone who is open, generous, and well-intentioned towards others is unfairly hurt many times. Somehow their kindness is punished. Facing this pain and threat, their psyche seeks control and understanding, leading to a problematic interpretation. Being good has brought me problems, so I'm going to stop being good. If giving to others makes me invisible, I'm going to start taking from others. This reaction is actually irrational. The fact that you were hurt when you were open, innocent, kind, and generous doesn't mean that was the cause of the pain and the problems. But in the end, our mind always tries to protect and defend us with whatever it finds. So many people make this irrational interpretation that if they've suffered, it's because they've been too good. So instead of simply starting to set boundaries, prioritizing themselves more, or being more careful about who they open up to, they go to the opposite extreme. They adopt the traits of the one they perceive as powerful, as someone above them, as the aggressor.
You're coming tonight? No, I have plans with Molly.
So they stop feeling vulnerable. That's identification with the aggressor, and it's behind why so many abused and mistreated people later become abusers themselves. And so, little by little, Evan starts to behave badly, even worse than his classmates. He cheats on Bree with her best friend Lucy, hides this information for years with countless lies, gets Bree's mother, who is a recovering alcoholic, drunk so that Bree will be disappointed and spend the summer with him instead of her mother. He manipulates and toys with girls who fall for him. Anyway, once again, the series shows us that most people become manipulative not out of malice, but because they've been hurt so much that they've learned the only way to feel safe is by being in control. And I think many people have gone through part of Evan's process. Sometimes when you've spent too long bottling things up, your mind pushes you toward the opposite extreme, to become selfish, tough, relentless, to be the one who has the power. It's an understandable defensive response. But little by little, when you start to feel safe, calm, secure, it's your responsibility to leave that extreme stance and move towards something more balanced, something healthier. I'm good, but I know how to set boundaries. I'm open, but I know who I can truly open up to and who I can't. I'm generous, but I know how much to give, when, and to whom. I'm empathetic with others, but I'm also empathetic with myself. And finding this balance, this position, is something Evan never manages to achieve. Just like many people who prefer to stay in the role of the aggressor, let's finish with Diana. She is Steven's girlfriend, a dark, toxic manipulator with very dangerous narcissistic and psychopathic traits. However, Diana isn't bad like Steven.
I'm sorry about the whole 18-year-old sluts thing.
It's okay, I'm not a slut, so...
So, why is she with him? Why does she defend him in front of others? Well, to understand Diana, you have to analyze her father, a successful, powerful, competitive lawyer. A father with whom Diana has a close relationship and with whom she identifies. When it comes to her mother, what she actually feels is rejection. In other words, Diana, in building her personality, has identified with her father. She wants to be like him, and so she adopts traits of his personality, ideas, beliefs, and so on. Among these ideas, the most prominent is the mindset that the world is ruled by winners and losers. And of course, you have to compete, you have to win. The problem with growing up like this is that Diana arrives at college with a very solid identity on the outside, but it's borrowed. She hasn't built who she is from the inside, she's built herself from the outside. I am what my father represents: success, competition, winning. This happens to many people. They build their identity based on a parental model, but not from their own exploration. And that's why they choose careers that aren't really their calling. They adopt ideologies and goals they haven't really thought about. And this explains why Steven is so attractive to Diana. Because it's not just desire or complicity, but rather it's like a recognition between two beings of the same kind. Two people who want to win in life. Two future lawyers. A couple of successful people, a pair of winners. In fact, they study together, plan their future together, and they look down on others together. In a way, Steven shows Diana a magnified version of herself. You and I are the same, the kind who make it to the top. But Steven, being the despicable person he is, starts to lie, to cheat, to be unfaithful. And that creates emotional wounds in Diana and makes her grow distant.
This is how you're going to do it.
I hate having to hurt you like this.
At first, her way of trying to cover up these holes is a bit like Lucy's style. Trying to win Steven back, validating herself by getting him back, competing with other girls who actually aren't her enemy. And when self-esteem is built on winning, any threat triggers an intense competitive response instead of withdrawal or reflection. Diana's identity is to win, to be first, to be perfect, so not winning at something feels like a failure of her identity. But little by little, Diana starts to see that Stephen isn't just someone competitive and ambitious like her. Behind his Machiavellian ways, there isn't someone with real legal talent. What there is a fundamentally bad and very dangerous person. Someone who actually got close to her not out of love, but because she is his way into job opportunities, scholarships, success, and money. Stephen is a parasite on Diana. He is only interested in her to get access to her father and that world of law and success. So Diana starts trying to distance herself from Stephen. In fact, she accidentally gets pregnant by him, and without thinking twice, she decides to have an abortion so she won't have any connection to this shady character. For Stephen, this is a betrayal, because he can't stand not having control over other people. And also because having had that baby with Diana would have meant having access forever to that wealthy and powerful family.
Good job, Diana.
Thank you.
So she punishes Diana harshly by sending intimate photos to her father. But here comes the most brilliant part. And it serves as a lesson for us on how to defend ourselves against people with these dark psychopathic traits. Diana, as a future lawyer, doesn't act out of emotion, but strategically. She doesn't act like Lucy, who tries to protest, fight, warn people, and ask for help out of impulsiveness and emotion. What she does is read Stephen to manipulate the manipulator. He's not going to let me go because he has strong interest in me. So the only way to get rid of him is for him to stop seeing me as something interesting. For him to be the one who thinks he's discarding me. This is a master move that you have to memorize and that you have to apply. Diana then pretends that she's getting bad grades. She couldn't get into the degree program or the university they wanted to go to. She pretends she ended things with her father and lost his financial support. Her emotional act succeeds. Stephen, with his coldness and his instrumental attitude, breaks up with her. And he also breaks up feeling that she is a pathetic loser. Diana is finally free. Unfortunately, this is the only way to truly free yourself from a psychopath. That they lose interest in you, that they see they can't get any useful reaction out of you, that they can't get anything out of you anymore, and that they feel like they've won. You have to let them think they've won, and sometimes you have to let them win. Because letting them win that battle means you win the war, even if that makes you look like the bad guy, or like the loser in the eyes of the world. It doesn't matter. Freeing yourself from that person is your victory. It's your mental freedom. Because believe me, having a psychopath obsessed with you is a guaranteed defeat.
It's the best I've ever heard. And I'm sure you already know that.
Because they have no limits, no scruples. They'll do whatever it takes to bring you down. There are no moral, social, or emotional restraints, and sometimes not even legal ones. With this strategy, Diana has not only gotten rid of Stephen, she has overcome that ingrained winner-loser dynamic. And that's what allows her, over time, to be able to choose Pippa, because she no longer needs to chase that success, to be number one. Now she seeks peace and wants to be loved for who she is, not what she has. She looks for someone she doesn't have to compete with or prove anything to, someone who truly sees her. If you notice, the characters who end up best in this story aren't the smartest, the strongest, the most perfect, or the most successful. They're the ones who, at some point, stop managing their image, stop running away, stop defending themselves. They're the ones who start being honest, who face their emotions, who become who they really are. Because honesty, coherence, vulnerability, even if they come late and at a high cost, are always the only way back to oneself. If you want to do in-depth therapy with scientific quality but also human warmth, and the cost is a problem, you already know that at Estar Contigo Terapia we offer emotion-focused therapy with an interest-free financing system. So instead of having to pay session by session and making a big payment, you can pay for your therapeutic process little by little. So for example, 4 sessions a month would cost you €49 per month. It's the way we've found to make in-depth, high-quality therapy accessible to everyone and for every budget. So, as always, I'll leave the link in the comments, and I'll also leave the website and the QR code here in case you want to get more information and book your first session for free. And well, with this video, we say goodbye to the characters from Tell Me Lies. I hope you've enjoyed these analyses as much as I have, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!